Hi, I'm Tonyah Dee from Y'all, and this is about sugar and the addictive quality of sugar and how it affects your brain. So sugar, flour, alcohol, cocaine, marijuana, heroin, opiates, nicotine, these substances all do the same thing to your brain. And basically, if you look at all of these things, they've been processed or refined. They used to be a whole something, and they're processed and refined down to where you're extracting an inner essence of one of these things, and you're making that one thing the central substance, and it becomes very potent. It becomes a drug. It becomes a powerful chemical. And what each one of these little inner essences from this stuff, what it does to our brain is it goes, all of these things, the essences of those things go into our bloodstream up to our brain, and it releases a chemical called dopamine. And dopamine will flood into our brain's pleasure center. So our brains are naturally wired to receive pleasure. There's receptors on the part of our pleasure center that receives dopamine. But what happens is, as you continue to flood your brain with dopamine coming from these essences, it's not good for your brain. It causes a lot of havoc in your brain, and you might end up with just a feeling of brain fog, but that's because it's not good for your brain. And what your brain does to protect itself is it eliminates so many receptors on the pleasure center. So it's relying on you to eat or do these things, so it'll flood the dopamine into the pleasure center. But what happens is you can't be doing that all the time. So now you only have a few receptors on your pleasure center, and it becomes more difficult to get the dopamine into the pleasure center. So the result of that is you'll feel tired, you'll feel moody, moods, anxiety and depression, a lack of focus and concentration, decreased peace and joy, decrease, you just don't feel life. You're lifeless. Like this makes you feel very alive, very pleasurable. And what will happen is you'll have a very increased amount of cravings coming at you at all times for these substances, or one of them, hopefully. Anyway, and that's the addictive process in general, is you're going to have fewer receptors for dopamine, so you're going to have more cravings for these so that you can feel the pleasure that you used to feel. Now, the good news is that if you can decrease these things or eliminate them completely, your brain grows back this pattern, which is a lot of receptors for dopamine on your brain. And it does take a little bit of time. So that's where the word recovery comes in, because it's a little bit painful while your brain is growing these new receptors again, and you're not getting that amount of pleasure. But the good news is there's natural ways to get dopamine into your brain. And the natural ways are exercise. Exercise actually grows new brain cells. And I'm addicted to walking. I love walking, and I feel so much better after I take a walk. And that's because I now have dopamine in my brain. You can learn to meditate. I believe meditation has to be God's gift to humanity, because when you meditate, you go inside. And what do we have inside? Well, we have our human spirit and we have God's spirit. And the goal of, I think, our spiritual journey is to become more spiritual. So you have to find that connection with God's spirit in your heart. I actually teach spiritual meditation and biblical meditation. I believe in it so strongly. Another way you can increase dopamine is to get a massage. And massage is a really good form of a stress release, or any sort of touch. Actually, gentle touch really helps to increase dopamine. And then, interestingly enough, music increases dopamine. It's not that surprising, because, when you're down, you put on some music, some tunes, you feel better. But if you can take it a step farther, they've been able to prove that music with positive messages increases more dopamine. And then one step farther is if you can actually sing music with positive message, it really increases your dopamine. And I became a musician and released a lot of meditation and sing-along song type music for that purpose. So I tend to do these three things every single day. So I keep my dopamine stores up, which then you have the opposite of all of this. You're not tired, you have plenty of energy, you're not moody, your moods are stable, you're able to focus and concentrate, you have increased peace and joy. You really don't have cravings. There's not like you're not craving, because your life feels pleasurable enough. And you feel very, very alive. So I think that these things here, we're headed towards here. We're getting an inner essence. And our inner essence, again, is God's spirit that's dwelling deep at the core of us. So anyway, this is a little thing on sugar and the dangers and the trap and how difficult it is. They actually say sugar is more addictive than cocaine. So if you're caught in the cycle, it's just such good news that our brain does repair itself. We can go back to normal amounts of these receptors for dopamine in our brain, but really try to look at ways of getting dopamine into your brain and your pleasure center more natural ways. This is Tonyah. I'm Tonyah from Y'all-ite, and I hope this was helpful. Go in grace and go with grace. Thanks so much.